Welcome. Glad you could join me this morning. We'll try to make this interesting. It's a little bit of a different topic for many of you guys. We're going to have a conversation about conversations. And so what exactly makes a conversation crucial? We'll get into that a little bit. So, what's the saying that truth is stranger than fiction? You ever hear that said before? So I got a great story for you to open. Okay. So most of you guys know Colleen, right? My wife. If you've had Identity Matters, you know her. You also know her as someone who oversees the activities in the mission and programs and whatnot. Well, okay, so this was a yesterday thing. This is really fresh in my mind. We also started a ministry together called Embracing Brokenness Ministries, and as a result of that, what we've done is we've done some writing, I've done some blogging, video content like you're seeing here. And also, we've done some teaching here and outside of the mission. So what was really interesting about this week's topic here, especially when we talk about crucial conversations, is I didn't really expect to have a crucial conversation last night with my wife, but I did. So I'm going to share it with you. Stranger than life. So last week, I wrote a blog on spiritual warfare. Now, spiritual warfare is a subject that for many people it can be strange, it can be a little daunting to try to figure out exactly what's behind the things that we can't see. You know, if you're a Christian, you get what I mean. There are forces around us that we just don't get to understand entirely, and it was not a category much for me growing up. But what I did was I wrote about it, and then I shot a video yesterday that we post on our website, and I could probably put it on Facebook. There's a couple of places that we would normally put the content that we have a conversation about. So yesterday, I shot it outside. It was a little cold, but it was bright. It was shiny, you know. And what I didn't realize that I was going to come up against, though, was my own set of warfare. Okay, so. Has anybody seen the movie Fury? It came out in 2014. It was a while ago, right? Brad Pitt, right? There you go. So, pretty violent, a lot going on in the movie. And I thought, boy, what a better way for me to kind of capture the reality of the world we live in by just showing a clip, the trailer for Fury. And it's, a lot going on. I mean, if you remember, he said, best job I ever had. And all the guys were kind of talking about this. It was a tank. I don't even want to call it a regiment because there was only probably one or two tanks assigned to this duty of holding back the Germans in a pretty critical spot. And so the reason I tell you all this is that I decided to run this clip in the middle of my conversation about spiritual warfare. And I thought it'd be a great way for us to grab a hold of the reality of the world we live in and try to parallel it with the unseen world. At least I thought that was a good idea. And I still think it was a good idea, but at the moment, I guess my wife didn't think it was such a good idea. So what we're doing, so she comes home from the gym. I was home most of the day, and I said, look, I got to show you something I worked on just today, and I really like the way it turned out, so are you ready for this? And so she said, okay. So she comes sit down, and I push play, and I'm casting it on the television. And so you have this big 55-inch image of me in the backyard doing my thing and talking. And then I run this clip for Fury. And she goes, whoa, wait a minute. What are you doing? I said, what are you talking about? This is great. She said, no. She said, we can't do this. There's too much here. This is way too violent. I mean, a lot of the people that we appeal to are women. They're not going to relate to this. And I said, well, of course then it's not all women. There's men. And you know what? We got to tell the story to men too. And so we're going back and forth and back and forth. And all of a sudden, shut it down. I go, okay, forget it. So I turned it off, and I'm sitting here in silence trying to figure out, okay, what just happened? I just had this conversation on the screen about spiritual warfare. I'm going to teach on crucial conversations today. I'm in the middle of silence trying to figure out what just happened. And we're just sitting there. And the story I'm telling myself, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is, okay, forget it. You know what? It's not worth it. All right, forget the video. Forget the ministry. Okay, fine. If that's the way you want to feel about it, I'm not doing anything. This is what I'm telling you in my head. You've never had these conversations with yourself, right? When you have a conflict with somebody, you're just forget it. I'm not dealing with this anymore. all right, I'm not writing, we're writing a book, forget that, it's not worth it. I'm just going to like go about my business and I'll do something else. This is what I'm telling myself, just because we have this sort of different perspective on how we should bring this material forth in spiritual warfare. So fast forward to later, you know, she actually gets up, gets in the bathtub, and just kind of, that's a place where she loves to go just to be quiet with the Lord and has this quiet time. And so I'm saying to myself, okay, good. The Holy Spirit will now tell her that she was wrong. And she can come back and apologize to me, right? Everything will be just fine. No. No, it didn't happen. All of a sudden she gets out of there and I hear, I'm going to bed. It's like, okay. Like I didn't say anything. And then I'm sitting out there in the living room. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is about the dumbest thing that I've ever heard of, right? In my own mind and what's going on in hers, I'm sure I can only imagine what she's telling herself too, right? Because it just triggered something in me. And if you were in Identity Matters, most of you guys understand the wounds, the traumas, the things in our life that really get to us. Well, I immediately realized, oh, wait a minute. Like I grew up in this home where my dad was extremely authoritarian, strict, and just would just badger me constantly for perfection and performance and all the thing. And so immediately what I realized is that, oh my mind, that just triggered a little something in me that just set in motion this series of events. It just made no sense whatsoever. But in the real world, yeah, of course, I'm like pride. Something inside of me is going, I got to win this thing. I got to win, right? Because my way is much more spiritual than your way. Okay, so this is what's going on. So then I sit there and I realize, okay, time out. What is going on here? I love it because there's the perfect example of what spiritual warfare can look like. I mean, do you think, and I remember saying in the video, I said, the enemy just wants to kind of chew us up and spit us out. He would love to just get between families and marriages and just get in the way of everything that we're trying to do and what he's called us to do. And I'm sitting here going, well, of course, that's just what happened in that exact moment, right? So what am I going to do with this? So I go into the room and I said, I start laughing, kind of a, not real laugh, but laugh. I said, do you realize this would happen? I have material for crucial conversations tomorrow because we're in the middle of one right now. We have to find our way through this, right? But I also realized that there is an enemy that just wants to intersect everything we're doing as a ministry, as a couple, to try to stand in the way of working through these things. So I tell you all that at the beginning because I think it's important for us to understand that any conversation we have in life, crucial or not, but more the crucial ones can change the trajectory of your life in ways that we can't even imagine. And for me, I have always been, when I even had this subject on my radar and studied it even more, and there's a book entitled Crucial Conversations, in case anybody wants it. I think they have some in the Richmond Center, and a couple people you can borrow these. The subtitle is Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. Okay, so think about that. We don't learn when we grow up how to have these types of interactions. We just make our own way, try to figure it out as we go. And we usually fail pretty miserably at it. Like I don't know, it shows up mostly in our really close relationships because for people that we casually know, how crucial can it get, right? It's the people that are closest to us that we end up having conflicts with oftentimes. And how we manage that changes everything. And that's not only in our personal relationships, in our families, it's in our work flow. When you guys, I'm sure you've had situations at work where you don't agree with a coworker or a boss, somebody that you just can't relate to or get along with, and you don't understand what's really behind it all. When you have these types of conflicts, and you just don't mesh, right? But there's got to be a way that we can move forward to action even in our toughest moments. And so what I want to do today is just talk to you a little bit about what that would look like and what are the components and why does this even happen? So we're gonna run some video. There's a gentleman by the name of Joseph Grenny was on the team that wrote this book, and he has partners in it. And I have about maybe a 25-minute video we're going to run about midway, and just have you get a look at what from his perspective, when he wrote this, what really mattered to their organization, because they're behavioral scientists, if you know what that is, somebody that studies behavior. They work with companies and individuals, mostly companies, to try to help their teams mesh well and know how to handle conflict. But everything in here is for life. It's for us. It's for real life. So, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to show you some examples of it. And this is kind of an interesting way to open this, but I want you to take a look here, if you will, with me, at a situation that I think would probably, it's funny, but in some ways, think about, oftentimes we don't consider what's going on the other side when we interact with people. So here's how to deliver bad news at work.
Hey, how's it going, man? So I'm supposed to tell you that you're not on the planning committee anymore, and it's probably because your ideas suck. Your ideas are not what we would call good, useful, having any value at all. I think they're great, but everybody else thinks they're terrible. You have ideas only a mother could love. Your mother. No, it's not that your ideas are bad. Can I text it? Yeah, I'll text it to you. But just be sure not to read this until like after work. Or until like you get home, after some good news. I'm sorry no one thinks you're fun. You know, I think it's really admirable that you would continue to say such bad ideas out loud in the face of so much justifiable opposition. It's so inspiring. Good talk. I feel so much better. Is that a new keyboard? No?
That's funny, but I'm sure that's happened a few times. You know, when you think about the world we live in, there are so many things that go on inside of that it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that conversation happened a few times. What has your experience been like when you get into a time when you know it's less than easy to share your frustration with somebody? What's it been like for you guys? What have you done oftentimes around that? Anybody give me a little feedback on that? Huh. Expound on that a little bit.
It's kind of like, I'm an artist, I draw myself.
Ah, okay.
People come up to me sometimes with pictures and art. I don't want to tell, great job. But it kind of looks like a 2-year-old. I'm not going to tell you, hey, I'm trying to encourage you.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, I didn't say that.
He thought it, he should think it, say it. Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, we get into situations like that, and and that's a great lead-in, because one of the questions here is that why do we think we have to choose between keeping a friend and telling the truth? We really don't have to, right? Well, it does, and the hard part is, because of what you see on the slide up here, consequences of the fall, we just don't do it perfectly, right? One of the principles of crucial conversations is starting with heart. Well, so often, where do we start from? We start from our own kind of position of selfish motives to say, you know what, it's really about me. It's not so much about you, instead of thinking the other way around. And we don't have to choose. Like, there are times when the truth should be told. Like, if somebody really wants your honest opinion about something, you should say, well, look, I'm happy to share it with you, but understand, like, this is not a personal attack, right? This is just me giving you a thought that may help you improve in the situation you find yourself in. Like, there are ways to engage in conversation which don't offend somebody immediately, like you saw that, right? I mean, sure, the guy sitting in the cubicle is going, what just happened here? Like, he didn't say anything, but that's because it was a one-sided video. But for me, last night, all I know is my reaction was, I'm fighting back. Like, you kidding me? You're attacking my piece of artwork. You know, my video, my writing. Like, what in the world is that about? Of course, that's not what she was doing. What she was doing was she was concerned about the message and how people would interpret it if they see a war scene. Now, I had a different view of that, but why not talk it out, right? Well, we didn't talk it out. We did what? We acted it out, and it was not a good result. Well, and that's a great point. Is it an opinion or is it truth? And so what's funny about that is when we start talking about situations that we see from our lens compared to somebody else's, does that mean we're right and they're wrong? Or that they're right and I'm wrong? Not necessarily, right?
I'm more of a direct person.
You know what? And I kind of appreciate that. I grew up in Philly. So if somebody didn't like you, they just told you. Like, you just knew it, right? If you were getting a knife, you weren't getting it in the back. You were going to watch it coming at you, knife, right? I mean, if you're from New York, you're from Philly, like, it's direct. In Lancaster, when I moved out here 23 years ago, I saw a whole different sort of way of communicating. It was not that transparent. So when I thought somebody was saying something that was approving, and found out that they were talking about me behind my back and having some other feeling about it. And by the way, I'm not picking on Lancaster, okay? It just happens to be my experience here versus in Philly. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are willing to have a good conversation. Right, and so, it might be cultural. I don't know. I mean, I grew up, my family's German, English. A lot of times you would be, you don't want to be read, right? You want to kind of be hidden behind something, and I think it's part of our poser mentality to start with as a result of the fall, that we do what we do. And so why is that? I think largely that's the first reason. We fell from God. We chose to, what would be the right word? Indulge in the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, which means we had no idea at the time what we were getting into when we did it, but in doing that, we fell from our Creator. We would just walk every day, talk, hang out in the Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden, for all they knew, was the entire world from their perspective, and there's beautiful surroundings. The animals, you're just, oh my gosh, can you imagine what it was like? Because that's where we're going again someday, guys, except it's going to be even greater because we're going to have even more camaraderie, and you can think about just walking and talking with God, what that looked like. And when we chose to do that, that separated us from Him because He can't be around sin. But the interesting thing about it was He immediately provided a way back, right? And it was part of the plan. But free will is another conversation for another day, but free will also allows us to do the things we do and offering up our opinions in conversation with people that maybe they aren't real in favor of, or they don't really like the way we're doing it, or we have this angst between us. Well, we also fell from creation and ourselves, and here's the biggie. We fell from each other, and the conflict began. Okay, so in falling from each other, that meant our relationships were less than perfect. We just can't always get it right. But that doesn't mean there isn't a way through it. So we have to look at, first, understanding why conflict exists. Now, look, probably 98, I don't know the exact percentage, a large percentage of our conversations would not fit in this category of crucial. Most of them, right? Every day we hang out, we talk, we're just doing things together, we're doing life. It's not crucial. It's just us getting to know each other. Once in a while, though, this is what happens. Okay, well, all right, that's one thing. Opinions can vary, okay? And that in of itself is no big deal when you think about it. Like, my opinion varies on my favorite sports team with somebody else. That doesn't mean it's crucial. We all know the Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Well, no, they're not. They were. We all know that they're the best team in football, right? No, it depends on who you're talking to. There's a couple of people around here I think are Steelers fans, probably some Ravens fans. There's some other people that think the Eagles aren't any better than anybody else. Even then the Phillies, even though they signed Bryce Harper, aren't necessarily going to win the National League East and the World Series, right? Okay, good. Thanks. I knew you were on my team. So, But like I have a very strong emotions about my football team. I've been an Eagles season ticket holder for 38 years. Wow. See, that's right. We got to all kind of have a different way of looking at things. Yeah. So I've been a big follower of this football team since I grew up. And I love going down to these games, and I've been to more than I can count. But just because I'm emotionally charged and tied to my team, and my opinion might vary from somebody who's a big Chicago Bears fan, or they're not the big rivalry in this area. If you like the Cowboys, we got a problem. Me and Mike Booth talk about it all the time, right? So it's a problem, right? No, it's not a problem. Here's why it's not a problem. This is the third thing that has to exist when we find ourselves in these situations. The stakes have to be high. Now, how high are the stakes when it comes to the Cowboys Eagles? Come on, seriously. Like, I don't own the team. Well, they could be if for example, if you put some money on the game. I don't know, but the point is that it's not like life or death for us, right? The game's over. I mean, as a kid, I used to if the Eagles lost on Monday morning.
Yeah, but you have to think, if the team's being played in Philadelphia, they do have a jail cell in their own stadium.
Well.
Could be very high.
Well, that's a really good perspective. The stakes are really high when the opinions vary and the emotions are strong. So there's a lot of crucial conversations taking place in the jail cell if you get in a fight over whether the Cowboys or the Eagles are better, right?
I mean, they even have a judge standing by waiting
Yeah.
for a court decision.
Yeah, I don't think they do it in the new stadium, but they did do it in the vet. But good point. Good point. The whole reason behind our understanding of these three things existing is because it doesn't happen in every conversation, right? I mean, this question that we had last night that we didn't discuss very well, but the good news is this morning I apologized, and so did she, and we had a really good conversation about how critical it is when we speak about issues that God's put on our heart in ministry or with people that we know and don't know. We have to communicate that in a way that we're sure is effective, it's right, and it's how God would want us to bring that message. But there's a different way of having that conversation than the way we did, right? And so when these three factors are involved, things can get a little tense. And so I think it's important for us to remember that this right here, which means, let's see if you believe this, the health of a relationship, team, or organization, let's talk about relationships for a second, is a function of the average time. No, it's good. I'm going to drop it in later. Thank you, though. Is the average time lag between identifying and discussing problems. That's the health of a relationship. So let's say, for example, in this situation last night, if I would let that sit, if I would not have, and I'll tell you what, I did not sleep well last night at all. Like, if you guys know anything about Colleen, and I, like both of us, are very good at finding ways to resolve issues, and I would think, but this was something that pointed it out to me that I'm not nearly as good at as I thought I was. And we love each other like two people couldn't. So, I mean, it's just beyond even what God did in our lives to bring us together a few years ago. It's another story, but it's phenomenal. And so there's so much between us. There's a bond that when this breaks down the way it did, I was struggling big time with it. So what if I'd have sat on that day in and day? What if I would not have addressed that? How would our relationship have looked? It's bad, right? Like, think about it. Do you remember the story of the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? Okay. How long did this family battle it out in the hills of Kentucky or wherever they were? It's crazy. I'll bet you by the third generation, nobody could tell you what even started it. They couldn't even tell you. Now, the history books probably recorded what started it. But 100 years, however long it was, is a long time to be battling it out, and you don't even know why. Can you think of family members that you might have had that you just don't talk to or that you don't have a relationship with now? And you're like, well, what was that about? Like, where did that all start? It's why making sure that we shorten the time frame where we deal with those issues is critically important. If you walk away with nothing else today, I hope you get one or two things out of this. What's critically important is when you have a issue with your friend, this is scriptural. I mean, it's real simple. Like we have to go to our brother if we have conflict, and if we cannot, and this is Matthew 18. If we can't resolve that conflict, we're to bring somebody with us, right? To try to help sit in the middle and mediate that. And I think the longer we wait, the harder that just is. We get entrenched in this idea of why it is we're so right that we become really, really wrong in the sense of what we're trying to accomplish and move forward in our relationship. This could have torn us completely apart. So I tend to believe this is really true. We got to shorten the time when we have a problem. Let's resolve it. Let's resolve it sooner than later. Basic principle, makes sense. One of the hardest parts about our relationships that makes it difficult in doing that is that there's so many things going on, right? Inside of our head and in the heads of someone else that we're in immediate conversation with, that we forget that it's really important to try to read or understand the other person's perspective. Like, for me last night, it just didn't matter. I felt attacked and I was just going to go on the defense and nothing mattered. I'm not taking the video down. I'm leaving it up. It's on YouTube still. You can find it. But I realized, well, there's a reason that I have to really consider what's going on her side of the equation. And I understood it better this morning when I was taking deep breaths and I was in a better space. Go ahead, Adam.
I was hoping you were going to show the video.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll have to give you a link to it. Go to the Embracing Brokenness YouTube channel. I'd love to get your feedback because I think what we decided this morning, which was really good, talk about resolution and how you get to a place where a common ground, is that we said, well, let's take this video and show it to 3 or 4 or 5 people that we consider safe, right? We remember safe people. We talked about that in Identity Matters, who could provide us with the feedback we would need to say, yeah, that was a little harsh. Like, I don't know if that was really a good thing, or, oh my gosh, it so represented the battle that we live in right now, or whatever their opinion was. So we came to a resolution that might be a good thing to do before we release it or put it out there, or maybe I even take it down, because I get 6 people that go, oh, that was horrible, like the way you presented that. You can't play it now. So really, but I would, if you look at it, I'd be happy to have your opinion. Catch me sometime. Embracing Brokenness Ministries YouTube channel. So the question, though, is more about how do we interact with one another in this? There's a lot of research that's been done on this subject, and if you're familiar with this sort of fight, flight, freeze response in our body, have you ever experienced that? You get into conflict and it's like, one thing leads to another. You get to a place where you're, like last night, quite frankly, like all the blood drained from my brain. It just did. Like I was ready to fight not fight physically, but just fight this thing out. So all logic left me, right? I didn't have any clue what was going on. So I love this video. I'm going to show you something to kind of illustrate this, and it's a good one because it'll give you I have 2 things going here. It'll give you a much different perspective, and you'll be able to kind of see what goes on chemically in our body.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight, or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. the mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result, we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Have you guys experienced that? Have you gotten to a place where you, yeah. And I think one of the more fascinating things when you think about it is if you go back to the day, I'll just say when Adam and Eve, you can imagine what it was like living in perfect harmony with one another and the animals that were created by God, and they even named them, right? So I can only imagine what their life looked like once they fell. Right? So, God actually killed one of the animals to provide covering, a skin for them. So now all of a sudden, they experienced death. And not only that, the animals, the creation that God created in the animals fell from each other too. So now all of a sudden you have this sort of new world order right, around you, and everything has changed. So in the past, when Adam and Eve could just wander up to a lion and just kind of hang out and pet and stroke his beard and have a cool time of it, now there is no way. I mean, they have to escape probably the jaws of the Lion King, unlike before. So, wow, I mean, their whole world was turned upside down. So fight and flight and freeze became a normal way of life. Like, when they went out, they had to be on guard. They weren't sure exactly what responses they were going to get from the animals. But can you imagine them, the before picture and then the after picture? See, we've not known it any other way. They knew it one way, and it turned into a different way of life for them. So in every conversation we have that's crucial, there is a response sometimes which does drain, you saw there, drains the brain of the necessary blood flow, and the ability of thinking takes over, because back then what happens, it activated your muscle groups, and when you ran, you took off. You either took off or you turned and fought. Now freeze is another response. I guess when you're in the ocean and a shark's swimming around, you're not supposed to be fighting or flighting, right? You're supposed to just be still. All right, so that's sort of a better freeze. I'm not sure I could do that, by the way, right? I'd be kicking them in the mouth, trying to get away. I don't know. But you can understand how hard it is now for every one of us when we get into a situation where there's conflict, when it's tense, when we're not sure just how this is going to play out. What is our response? Again, it's good to know that, because it's not every time should we be engaging. Like last night, there's no way I could have had a conversation that would have been worth anything. Like I had to calm down. I had to, take deep breaths. Even an hour later, I just was not in the frame of mind. So I even said to Colleen, I said, look, we got to talk this out, but not now. Like, it's just not a great time. Let's just try to process this and understand what happened, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And this morning, like she said, I got to jump in the shower. I said, time out. Not yet. She looked at me like this. I said, get over here. And I gave her a big hug, and I just grabbed the holder, and I said, look, I love you. You know, whatever this is about, we'll figure it out, you know. You know, she could start chuckling because you know, every morning that's a routine, the big hug, you know, in the morning, you know. So I think it's, you know, we have to be at the place where we can have that conversation and it's not going to result in even more difficulty. So what is your style under stress? Style under stress means like what happens when a situation like this occurs for you? Okay. All right. So you get angry, you get tense? Yeah. Okay, all right, reasoning. Well, sure. So you try to walk through, so by your discussion, you just try to figure things out. Now, is it to your in your own head or out loud? So you process out loud. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It can make things worse because I'm trying to figure out
Sure.
what and why.
Sure.
You know, what's going on, why it's happening, what, you know, we got to
Yeah.
fix it somehow. And
Yeah.
it makes it worse.
Yeah. And it can because it depends on the other person, where they are in the process, whether or not you can have that conversation, right? Anger comes out in a lot of different ways. You can see it physically. A lot of us, sometimes we retreat. For me, I usually do that, retreat to silence. Like after I found myself voicing my opinion inappropriately, but then I just shut down. Which, by the way, that's most. If you just doing a poll, this happens with most people. They just shut down. They go, no, I don't want to. You know, conflict avoidance is number one. It's probably the worst thing you can do, as I said earlier, avoid conflict because you have to deal with it. But it's much easier, isn't it, just to say, all right, I'm shutting this down. I'm not dealing with this. It's what I did last night. No, right. But I don't know about you. Like for me, what happens is things mount over time, and so I can be quiet for a while, and then all of a sudden, boom, man, I'm on it. Like I'm lashing out in some way, shape, or form. Like you can continue to badger me for a while, or I could feel like I'm being somewhat abused, if you will, which is probably more my problem than theirs, right? How I view other people. And then I'm lashing out in return. Now, it didn't take me long last night. I kind of did right away because I felt like I was so right about this, which also probably makes me really wrong about it. So that's one way. The other way would be bouncing in the attack, right? Attack mode, like you were saying, right? You want to go after it somehow or another. And I think if it shows up in anger, it shows up in raising your fist. Maybe when we were kids, it's like, all right, you want to fight? Let's go. Let's do it right now. We'll settle this. We settle this. If I'm just a tougher guy, I'll take you out. Like, I don't really care what you think. I'm just stronger. Well, that doesn't exactly work in most of life now, does it? We end up behind those little skinny bars that are like really, yeah. So it's not a good idea. Or this is your last option. Do the best you can to keep the conversation calm, focused, and on the issues at hand. That's the right answer, by the way. That's the right answer. But that's it. That's not an easy thing to do. Right. It is the hardest thing to do because there's so much at stake sometimes when we have these crucial conversations. We don't know how to keep it on track. And that's the thing. That's why it says tools for talking when stakes are high. You can develop skills around this subject matter. That's why I would highly recommend the book for anybody, even if you're not in the middle of a conflict now. If you can master this, I'm telling you, it will change everything in your world. Because people will see you differently. They'll see you as someone who's willing to engage the issues, talk about hard things, respect your point of view, but also know that their point of view would be respected. There's a lot to this, by the way. So don't take it lightly. There's so much here for you to learn if you want to engage in this message. This is, again, just something to introduce you to the idea. So there is a stress test. It's here. You can find it online. I won't get into it right now. But these are the elements that we have to deal with. Now, I circled number one because in crucial conversations, most of the time we're stuck somewhere, right? The reason why we're having this debate or discussion or not having it, in most cases, is because we're stuck somewhere we can't get past. Either I can't get past it, you can't get past it, and in relationship, especially in husband and wife relationship, this could make all the difference in the world as to whether your marriage lasts a year or 100 years, right? How well you do that, get unstuck, is huge. Because there's no, the honeymoon period ends pretty quick. Have you guys ever been in a dating situation, give it a few months, all of a sudden you realize, hey, wow, this person really is just a person. They're not this, individual who's floating around on cloud nine right now, right? There's a lot more to life than just what I see. So getting unstuck is critical when we have these conversations, and they're tough. I, without getting into all the other things we'll talk about, starting with heart is critical. Like, think about the idea of starting with heart. There's so much in that. Because if you care more about the other person than you do your own self, if you're the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that's a great place to start with heart. And again, it may not happen in the moment, but at some point, keep that lag time, that time between when you deal with it, to a minimum. Get yourself in a position where you can start with heart, and it matters to you. So let's just keep moving. Joseph Grenny says, and this is the gentleman who you'll hear from in a minute, the big idea number one: anytime you find yourself stuck, stop and ask, what crucial conversation are we not holding or not holding well? That's an interesting perspective. We're not holding at all. Like, there can be things that we're not even talking about. It's not a conversation. It's just lurking back here somewhere, and we're not dealing with it. What are we not talking about? And if we are talking about it, we're not doing it well. That's a critical part of getting unstuck. And so this, and I'll have some sheets I want to give you at the end, but this model shows it really, really clear. Well, it's not real clear to you guys, but we want to get to that center spot where we call the pool of shared meaning. It's a nice, cool blue pool. Think of it like a little jacuzzi. We're kind of in it together. It's nice. We got to get there. And there's a lot of factors that just stand in the way of doing it. And all the way from the outside in, see and hear, tell a story, feel, act. See that ring on the outside? Violence on the bottom, silence on the top. What's in the middle between the blue? Safety. We got to make it safe. Same thing when we talk about safe people, safe community. We have got to find a way to get into that pool of shared meaning where it's safe to have a conversation. Like, you're not judging something. Remember we talked about that? What's the number one person, the number one attribute of a safe person is they're non-judgmental. They don't look at me and judge me based on something they see or hear or feel. It's really important. Now, there's a ton of others, especially in Christian relationships, that they put Christ first, and there's you can name tons of them, right? We did that in the other class. But that is really an important factor in this whole process, is creating safety. But we see things differently, don't we? Look at these guys. Let's see what these guys, what do they see when they look at that? What's the cat see? Oh, dinner, exactly. What's that baby seeing? Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. I never even saw this before, Yeah, well, yeah. Let me just, I'm mesmerized by this little fish running around in there, right? But that guy on the left is going, oh my gosh, this is like chicken of the sea. I don't know, whatever. So we got to remember, we see things differently. That's just the way it is. So I'm going to show you a picture here, and I want you to tell me what you see. What do you see in this picture? You see the woman facing away from you? Yeah, do you? Or do you see the old lady with the, you see them both. Good. You see them both, though, right? Can you see the shift in that perspective?
I can do it on Facebook.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, well, some people it's hard, right? I've had people tell me, I just can't see it. I see the one, but I can't see the other. Well, think about how hard that is in reality. And, this example is that somebody's judging what they see, like, oh, she misses important deadlines because she's irresponsible. That's one way of looking at it, right? The other way of looking at it is this, even though it's the same picture, another way of looking at it is that she misses important deadlines because she's resistant to change. That's two totally different things. Like, if we understand somebody who's resistant to change, we can work with that person differently, right? They just have to understand what's at stake. So that's two totally different perspectives. And what comes along with that, unfortunately, and I said it earlier, is what is the story that you're telling yourself? You know, you have a story, the other person has a story. And we have to find common ground in that story. And there's ways, examples of how we can kind of parrot back. Like if we're hearing somebody talk and we want to understand them, even though we're looking at it through our lens, repeat it back. You just say, okay, so what you're saying is, or it leads me to conclude that, or I believe that, or I start to think that. So you are sharing your view of what that looks like. Rather than passing judgment on that, you're taking a different place, a different perspective, right? So it's a different perspective. It's a shift. It's like, all right, let me understand. There's a book that was written, a lot of years ago called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If everybody's ever seen it before, but it's kind of interesting. The guy by the name of Stephen Covey, and one of the first things that he talks about, habit number 4 is think win-win. So you've heard that phrase, right? The win-win. So it's a win-win. So there is win-win possibilities. Even though we have to somehow find middle ground, it still could be a win for both of us on what we're trying to do. Because remember, in the end, when we have conflict, what are we really trying to do? We're just trying to move each forward, right? We're trying to get into an action place, or place where we're acting or moving in a direction for the relationship, the business, the organization, whatever it is you're discussing that's really a troubling issue. You're trying to move use a sports metaphor, the ball down the field more, okay? That's what we're trying to do. So win-win. Number 5 is seeking first to understand, then to be understood. So that's a posture much the way the scripture tells us right here in Luke 6:31, doing to others as you would have them do to you. I kind of drew the parallel. I think it is. Listening to others as you would have them listen to you. Same concept. So what I want to do is I want to run this video. It'll give us a few minutes at the end, and I think you're going to find this interesting. Because Joseph Grenny this is basically his perspective. So some of the things that we're talking about, we're gonna just have him give you a different way of looking at it from not only his perspective. Let me get this free here, but for the perspective of the crew that was actually writing this book, if you will.
I want to take you back through some of the part of our history that you might not be familiar with. I'm going to lay down 3 threads and try to weave them together in the next 28 minutes. So here we go. First, about 18 years ago, I got a brand new toothbrush. It was one of those electric ones that is about 180 horsepower, oscillates at 5 million times per second. And I was enjoying it immensely until one evening when, after using it, I exited the bathroom and I heard a voice calling out to me in a loving way that said, "Get back in here." I came back in and my wife was indicating the mirror, which had this beautiful kind of Kandinsky effect on it with spittle all over the place. She said, "Joseph, I've asked you before." She said, I've asked you just to wipe that down. She said, "You seem so attentive to the needs of other people, but when I ask you something, you seem not to pay attention." Well, I defended myself on technical grounds. I let her know that it was more about the device than my own bad motives, tried to teach her the 6-source model in the moment. She wasn't having any of it. She left in a huff, came back a couple minutes later and said, "All right, that probably wasn't the best way for me to bring it up. I'm sorry, but," she said, "I find it irritating that I have to remind you again and again and again for something as simple as this." Well, at that point, I was not having her apology. I thought that was inappropriately expressed. I deserved more remorse than what she was expressing at the time. So to make a long story somewhat shorter, this ends up lasting 48 hours, by the way. I decided that night to sleep on the couch. Now, I want you to know that I chose to sleep on the couch. I was doing this to advance her maturing as an adult. I thought that it would be an important life lesson for her. So I lay down there on the couch, kind of smugly thinking that the next morning I would get a well-deserved apology for some of the abuse that I had received the night before. Let's pause that one. December 28th, 2009 was probably the most crucial conversation of my life. I'll start 10 months earlier. 10 months earlier, I was at home on a Saturday and there was a knock at the door. When I opened the door, there was a kind of shaggy, worn-looking character standing there. After a couple minutes of staring at him, I recognized something about the eyes and finally clapped him on the shoulders, pulled him in, and I said, Patrick, I haven't seen you forever. I dragged him in and sat him down on a chair. Patrick had been one of my scouts about 10 years earlier. He had been part of our little scout group, and we become fast friends, and over a couple years camped together a lot, but after a while he stopped coming. I tried to seek him out, but he seemed to be avoiding me. Finally, one of his friends said, I think Patrick is hanging out with kind of a rough crowd now, and I think he's into drugs. Well, that broke my heart. And I continued to try to find him, but finally gave up. So now it's 10 years later, and here he is on my doorstep. I sat him down and I said, Patrick, I said, tell me about what's going on. Well, he told me a story of woe that spanned a decade. Bad decisions, time in jail, time on the street, homelessness. He said, but I've decided I want to turn my life around. And when I started thinking of those I knew that I could trust to help and guide me, he said, you're the only one that came to mind. Everybody else, I think, is part of that other world that I want to leave. I said, I'm so glad you would reach out to me. So we talked for a couple more hours. We created a plan. He'd get a job. He'd start repaying fines, and he'd try to turn his life around. About 3 months later, he was doing pretty well. He said, you know what, I'm working a minimum wage job. There's this construction job that's a little farther away. If I could buy a car, I'd have transportation, I could do that. So I arranged to co-sign a loan for him. He got this old beater truck, and he began making payments on that, and things were going pretty well till about August of that year. And he disappeared, and it broke my heart. I tried looking for him. I tried calling his cell phone. I tried talking to common friends, and he was not responding at all. So I finally gave up. Now, I didn't connect the dots when in October of that year, my house was burglarized. And it worried me because I travel a lot, and so I worried about my family's safety in addition to just feeling violated and having somebody penetrate the sanctity of my home. So we went and got a very expensive surveillance system so that we could feel secure as I traveled a lot. It's hard to describe then how it felt in November of that year when our house was burglarized a second time, but this time we had video surveillance data. And as I looked back over that videotape, I saw Patrick enter our backyard, drop down into a window well, kick out one of the windows, and come out minutes later with some of our valuables. I sat there just breathless, watching this, feeling violated and angry, feeling sad and despair, feeling hopelessness for him. And what do you do? Well, I had no contact with him until December 28th of 2009. I was driving not far from our house, and I saw Patrick walking along the road. So I pulled the car over, I rolled down the window, and I said, hey, Patrick. The instant he recognized my voice, you could see his body tense, and he was about to spring and run. I said, Patrick, it's okay. I just want to talk. Third thread. Crucial Conversations for us was a happy accident. So it began like many of your lives in the back of a Volkswagen van. There were four of us, Al, Carrie, Ron, and myself, kind of talking and dreaming, and we came up with this idea that if we could help the world learn to change behavior, we could change the world, that would be a wonderful way of going about it. So we pulled together, we organized Vital Smarts, and that was 25 years ago last month. It's been a wonderful, wonderful quarter century, and you're an expression of the greatest joy that we have in that work, how many have joined what we think is one of the most important human problems we face. But as we started thinking about how to change the world by changing behavior, one of the questions became, what behavior, if changed, would make the biggest difference? So this is part of the story that's familiar to you. We began with that as a thesis question. Are there some moments of disproportionate influence where if people behave differently, if you and I could help them pay attention to those brief ephemeral points in time, and help them just slightly modify how they showed up, that we could change their lives, that we could change organizations, that we could change the world? Well, as we began our research looking for those kinds of moments, you're familiar with this moment, but I want to have you play it out anyway. So grab a buddy, grab someone at your table, put your hand on them right now so that everybody knows who's with whom. Get a partner. You got a buddy? All right, very quickly, who's person A? Pick an A and a B. Person A. Person A, let's have a volunteer. Okay, person A, you're going to be Nurse Bonnie. You're the woman in the left. Person B, raise your hand. Person B, okay, you're going to be Dr. Scott. So what I want you to do is just get ourselves into the crucial conversations mode. We're going to play the scene out. As soon as the scene stops, those of you who are Nurse Bonnie, raise your hand again, Nurse Bonnie. That's good. It's half the room. You did it very well. It's a smart group, isn't it, Ron? So as soon as the video stops, those of you who are Nurse Bonnie, turn to Dr. Scott and just say the next sentence you would say. Here you go.
Can I get you to check in on Mr. Gonzalez before you take off? He's the older gentleman who had the punctured lung. We're hoping to release him.
I can't. I got to get to my son's music assembly. Just, I don't know, just tell him something came up and I'll come back tonight and check on him.
Actually, his family's all here expecting to take him home. I told him you were just down the hall. Please, it'll only take a minute.
You told him what?
I assumed it would be okay. I thought you'd be right in.
Oh, you
Get
thought?
ready.
And where did you learn to think? Certainly not some 2-year rinky-dink nursing school, that's for sure.
All right, go. Where'd you learn to think? Turn and respond. Go. All right. Stop wherever you are. So we began very quickly to notice that there were moments like that of profound emotional complexity. But remember, that's not what we were interested in. So a lot of us that do crucial conversations training think that's why these deserve attention, because they're emotionally complex. No. That wasn't the thesis question. We wanted to change the world, not just help people feel more comfortable at moments that they're uncomfortable. So we asked, what is it about these moments? So first of all, we found these are moments where something really important to us is on the table. Second, these are moments where we expect others to disagree. And finally, those two come together to create this third condition. Now, I want to share some of the backstory because this has been not just an academic and experimental process for Ron Carey, David Allen, myself. It's been very much an action learning process. We've had the crucial conversations along the way. So a number of years back, Carrie and I were working on the chapter of a book, and we had a little process we'd agreed on that I'd take a first write, he'd do rewrites, he'd send it back, and then we'd get on the phone and discuss. So we'd done that process. We got together on the phone on a Saturday night, 7 o'clock, and I'd sent the chapter over to him, and he sent it back to me, and so we began the conversation. I said, so Carrie, did you get the chapter? He said, yes. I said, what'd you think? He said, you ruined it. I said, I didn't ruin it, I fixed it. He said, you didn't fix it. He said, it's all disjointed now. It goes from A to E to F. I said, it's not disjointed. I said, it's meaningful now. Now, how long did that conversation take? Did anybody time it? It was about 8 seconds, yeah. And all that happened that quickly. Now, the irony is, the chapter we were working on was called Master My Stories from a book called Crucial Conversations, of all things. So we were action learning our way through this, realizing these moments mattered a lot. The big idea that started to emerge from our work is that you can measure the health of a relationship, the health of a team, even the health of an entire organization by measuring the average lag time between identifying and discussing problems. That's what began to emerge from our research. And we began looking at ourselves from that same perspective. What about our relationships? What about our marriages? What about our families, our organization? What's the average lag time between identifying a problem, feeling it, and it getting on the table in a healthy way? To put it graphically, it looks kind of like this. So we all kind of walk along through life and we all have our white Volkswagen van moment when we have this super awesome goal that we decide to go after. So we start marching happily towards it. Inevitably, on that march, we encounter these moments. Why? Because there's something by definition of high stakes on the table. The instant you have a super awesome goal, by definition, there will be moments where the stakes are high, where people disagree, and then it becomes an emotional, visceral process. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've learned is that the best way to minimize the number of crucial conversations you have in life is to have a meaningless life. As soon as you go after something important, they will occur. Now, you're familiar with this important research. Any of you seen this before? Well, let's enjoy the moment for a second. I want to give you a backstory for it as well. So as we were doing our research, my son Samuel had a science fair project due, and he said he wanted to study how little kids deal with crucial conversations. I was not particularly encouraging. I said, Samuel, I think little kids don't have the same kind of social constraints that adults do. And yet, look what he found.
We all know adults stink at talking about tough things, but how about little kids? Here's my experiment. Feed kids wretched brownies, then see if they'll tell you the truth, especially when they think it might hurt your feelings. First, I made the brownies. Lots of chocolate, eggs and flour, but instead of sugar, I put in salt. Lots of salt. There's no way they could like these better. Now I recruit kids of various ages for a taste test. I tell them I want to compare ordinary brownies to my special brownies. My dear grandmother's special recipe. My dear dead grandmother's special recipe. Then I give them $1 for being such a big help. My parents always taught me that if you want someone to like you, give them money. Okay, here goes. First, they ate the yummy sugar brownies. Next, they eat the salt bricks. Watch this girl. She can hardly keep from gagging. And now for the crucial moment. Will they tell me the truth and possibly offend me? I asked them to point to the brownies they like best. No surprise that some tried to spare my feelings. But watch, even the one who gagged? And how about really little kids? But do you want to know what they really thought? Here, guys, I have leftovers. Does anybody want seconds?
Isn't that astounding? I was just absolutely blown away. Now, the backstory is that little girl whose face puckered up, her name is Hannah. She lives right next door to us, and she is one of the most blunt, honest, outspoken little kids in the world. But she's lying about the brownies. It blew my mind to see how one after another these kids, who with absolutely no other agenda, were coming in and lying about how they really felt. So what staggered me in that moment, and the words that sort of came to me, was at what a remarkably young age you and I start to draw a damnable conclusion. It turns out that at about age 3 or 4, you and I start to believe that you frequently have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend. And that one belief causes mischief for the rest of our lives. That's the controlling assumption that dictates how we show up in interpersonal situations from that moment forward. And that's why these moments of disproportionate influence have such an enormous effect. David Chase and I did a research project a few months back. We asked people across the world, if you had a magic wand that would eliminate consequences for just one conversation. So you have a permission now to say one thing, anything you want to anybody you want, and there will be no consequences. Who would you say it to, and what would it be? I want you to look at some of the responses and speculate for a moment with me about the consequences of these moments of disproportionate influence. So here was one. To my boss, for 8 years you single-handedly drove away every good employee we've ever had. I can no longer tolerate your condescending tone, your passive micromanaging, your overt verbal sexual harassment towards female employees, your hypocritical management or work time, or even your insincere compliments. Affectionately, moi. Now, here's what I want you to think about. What is the cost or consequence of keeping that in a vault? And how is it showing up today? That's what we began to notice. Second, to my wife. We've been together a long time, but it's time for us to consider going our separate ways. Ladies and gentlemen, so many broken relationships are not broken because it was inevitable. They were broken by silence. They were broken because the lag time between feeling a problem and discussing the problem in a healthy way yawned so wide that the relationship broke. To my supervisor. Now let me ask you the question. What does silence look like in that case? Is silence truly silent, or is it showing up? To my colleague, I betrayed your trust by sharing confidential information that you shared with me with another peer. I apologize. I'd change it if I could. How does guilt show up when it's undiscussed? To the woman next to me, do you have a cat or something that marks your coat, shoes, or bags? There's a really bad odor from you in your desk. It's very nauseating and offensive to me. Now that's a sensitive issue to put on the table. But let's ask ourselves, what is the cost of silence? And how is it showing up? The principle that we found over time, the reason these moments have such disproportionate influence is because you and I don't get to vote on how they affect relationships. If you don't talk it out, what do? You act it out. We know that. It shows up in 100 different ways. You sleep on the couch at night and you imagine someone suffering upstairs. If it's not getting discussed, it's getting acted out. It shows up in your behavior like this. Whenever I get mad at you, you never seem to get upset. How do you manage to control your temper? I just go and clean the toilet, she says. Well, how does that help? I use your toothbrush. To my husband, I feel frustrated by the mess and clutter in our house. I love you, but I can't stand this anymore. I've been patient for a long time. It appears you don't care. In addition, I think you need professional help to deal with hoarding tendencies. I want to get some counseling, and I think you should too. Now I ask us to contemplate for a moment, is silence truly silent? Or is it showing up somewhere? Finally, what if you were the boss and you're carrying this in your vault? Find a different job now. While I can't prove it, I know that you stir up trouble between your coworkers, you don't pay attention to your job, you lack respect for anyone, you take no responsibility for actions, and blame others. What you and I are trying to do in teaching crucial conversations, at least at the very basic level, is simply this. One simple concept that can dramatically change how people show up in crucial moments is just to read the title of the book. Because it causes us to do this, to start for once calculating the costs of silence, for once realizing silence isn't truly silent, to just carefully and thoughtfully list what are the costs right now. How is it showing up? And what is the default future if this continues to go undiscussed? That's what you and I are doing in the world. What we're trying to help people do is take a more mental, conscious calculus of the real costs of the decisions they're currently making. What you and I know is that crucial conversations aren't just a pit. They aren't just a problem to get over. They actually have the potential of becoming one of the accelerants of intimacy. Crucial conversations, well held, accelerate the building of trust between individuals. They not only don't damage it, they actually create a sense of connection with people that can't come most any other way. And yet, here's how we continue to look at them. The contribution you and I are trying to make to the world is to help them understand that it's the pathway to the super awesome goal, not just something that keeps us from it. So the first big idea that we came across was this: the vital behavior that enables most any organizational outcome is just candor. It's just showing up in those moments. And you've seen the research across so many different domains. You and I are saving lives, we're saving relationships, we're reconnecting families, we're building teams and organizations just by getting to look at that one moment a little bit differently. This has mattered to Vital Smarts as well. I remember the moment that I believed we could make it as a company. It's because after the Crucial Conversations book came out, there was a moment at which Yan Wang, our CFO, who comes from a tradition and background that does not encourage candor with people in positions of authority, it took immense effort for her to approach Al Switzler and say to him, Al, you've been taking books along on all of the book tour things and selling them at the back of the room to try to help promote things, and that's really well and good. But when you come back with a whole bunch of written credit card numbers and checks, it takes more time for us to process those than it's worth for the money. Perhaps you ought to just give the books away. After she finished that feedback to Al, it looked like she wanted to throw up. That was challenging. It was terrifying for her, and none of us could have been prouder of her. She set a tone for Vital Smarts. She helped us turn the corner and start becoming that kind of organization. We don't always show up perfectly, but we try hard because we know these moments are our lifeblood as well. So what you and I are trying to fix is that dynamic. Now, the last piece I want to do is just tie together a couple of those other threads. So it's December 28th, 2009. And I rolled down the window and I said, Patrick, would you just get in the car? After a couple minutes, he looked defeated, but he got in the car. We drove back to our house and I walked him down to the basement and I sat him in front of a television screen. I put a videotape in and I prepared to push play, but I said, Patrick, before I show you this, I said, I need to ask you a question. He was looking at the ground, just absolutely mortified in this moment. I said, Patrick, would you look me in the eye for just a moment, because I need to know that you hear me. So he finally, with great effort, locked on my eyes. And I said, Patrick, do you know that I love you? His eyes welled up with tears instantly. He said, yes, I do. I said, Patrick, do you know that I would never do anything if I didn't think it was in your best interests? His shoulders started to heave and convulse. And he said, yes, I do. I said, good. Then I need you to look at something. And I just played the security footage, at which point he started heaving and convulsing openly, sobbing. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I said, Patrick, I understand. But I need you to understand that I don't think I would be your friend if I didn't let you be held accountable for what you did to me and what you did to my family. I've turned this over to the police, and I know they'd like to talk with you. But that's your choice. It's up to you whether you make contact with them or not. What penetrated my soul was that his response, rather than defensiveness and rather than attack, was to say, I know I need to go to jail, but will you be there for me when I get out? And through my own tears, I said, Patrick, I will always be here for you. What we've learned along the way, as Al, Carrie, Ron, David, and myself have gone through our own crucial conversations, is that you don't have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend. It turns out that if people feel safe, you can speak truth. They may not like it. They may not enjoy it. It may cause pain and suffering for them, but at least they'll be able to hear it. The second gift you and I are trying to give to the world, in addition to noticing that these moments require a different kind of risk calculus than we've been doing throughout history, the second thing we're trying to help them do is to transcend that horrible dichotomy that they've been carrying since they were 3 years old. To for once realize that the problem is not the choice between telling the truth and keeping the friend. The problem is trying to figure out how to do both. And if all you and I ever do in our training is just help people to reframe the question, to say, how could I show up in this moment in a way that's absolutely honest and absolutely respectful, we will have done our job. And we will have changed lives, and we will have changed organizations. Candor isn't the problem. The problem is a lack of safety. And you and I are helping the world to understand that if you can create a context of safety in the Middle East, in war-torn countries, in the US, in divided cities, if you and I can help people just understand that if you can create a safe place to get honesty in the open, that intimacy accelerates, that connection is possible, then we will have done our jobs. So I'm laying down on the couch. And I'm imagining how the next morning I'll get this well-deserved apology, but I didn't. Instead, we went to this plastic kind of fake civility routine, and the kids who were there were sitting around and having breakfast, and I'm sort of pulling her chair out, and she's getting me the milk, and we're both acting polite like we kind of moved on past the moment. And that kind of disconnected insincerity went on all day long until that night. And I decided the best way to advance her education would be to sleep with her that night. And so I went in, I used the toothbrush, I wiped down the mirror, made sure she saw me doing it, and very self-righteously got in bed. She finished her bathroom stuff, she got in bed. Both of us respected the DMZ sitting there in between us, and she said, good night, honey. I said, good night, honey. She clicked off the light, and I lay down there, and I thought to myself, my goal is to go to sleep faster than her. because then she'll be writhing in agony and realizing I've moved on, and then she'll probably look at herself and her fallen ways and apologize. So I'm laying there kind of psyching myself into relaxation when I hear this. And I'm telling you, I've grown a little bit emotionally since then, but I still identify with the feelings. I felt this white hot rage shoot through my body. I'm laying there thinking, you don't even realize how much you've mistreated me, do you? I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how did I end up with her, right? And I'm going over and over in my mind all the wrongs and how mistreated I am in this relationship when after a while I looked over at the clock and it had been like 2 hours. And the moon finally comes down through the window and bathes her hideous face in its glow. And I literally looked at her and I couldn't imagine one redeeming quality this woman had. And as this kind of feeling is surging through me, finally this thought comes galloping towards me from off at the distance. And I saw it coming, recognized it, tried to dodge it. But it finally snuck around the other side, went into my ear, and the question was, what am I acting like I want? And what do I really want? And you know what? As soon as I relaxed into that question, that fast, this picture came into my mind. And the picture was when I'd come home from a trip earlier that week, I walked in, and she just looked over at me and smiled. And I felt connected, and I felt home, and I felt loved. And I surrendered to that. And I said, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. And you know what? I looked over at her, and she looked entirely different. She was beautiful. And I could remember everything that made me love her. And I slipped into slumber. And the next morning, the alarm goes off, and I woke up, but the sun looked brighter that day. And I looked over at her, but you could see the instant she remembered the mode we were in the night before, because her shoulders stiffened and she slid off the bed and she walked over and went to go into the bathroom. And I said, Selah, I'm sorry. I said, I wasted the last 48 hours and I wish I could have them back. She said, I'm sorry, and I want to hear everything that's on your mind and concerning you whenever you'd like to talk. She paused for just a moment, and I could see when it sort of got absorbed in her too, because her shoulders dropped about 2 inches. She turned around, sat on the edge of the bed, and we talked. It turns out that the way you see others during those crucial moments is less a reflection of who they are and more of a reflection of what we want. When our motives are bad, we can't even see people for what they are. What you and I know is that all it takes to get truth on the table is just a little bit of safety. It's just an apology. It's just a smile. It's just a hug. It's just taking something back. It takes very little, but people aren't willing to do it if they don't realize that you can transcend that false trade-off between telling the truth and keeping a friend. It is immensely gratifying to be part of this work with you. We hope you feel of our love and support for you. These are the big ideas that we're trying to take out into the world. When we were in the white Volkswagen van, you were just a gleam in our eye. But we're glad you're now part of the family. Thank you very much.
Give you a little different perspective, but yet sort of some of the same things we talked about from his point of view. I love the Brownie experiment. I thought that was pretty cool. Just when you think little kids are a little more, hidden in the way they think, or more honest, I guess I should say. No, they aren't. Like we learn at a really young age how to sort of put up these barriers and to think the things that Joseph was talking about, and I said it earlier, he said it, the fact that we really don't have to choose between keeping a friend and telling the truth, that we can have a relationship with someone if we create. I think the big thing for me, as a takeaway from me in this, and I don't know, I'd like you to think a little bit about that, is trying to make it safe. What does it look like for you to make the conversation a safe one? One where you can just feel comfortable. You know that the person that you're with feels comfortable. You aren't in a position where you're trying to defend territory. You're trying to just love one another, just the way God told us to love each other. And I think if we just keep our mind focused on the simple things in conversation or in relationship, it just gets so complex when we start to try and sort it all out, when we read people incorrectly, or we mask these stories we tell ourselves, like I created last night that I didn't sleep half the night over. Let's just make it simple. What do we really want? I think that's the question. What do we really want when we're faced with a tough situation, in a relationship, in anything? But what also struck me is the magic wand, right? What are people actually really thinking and not saying and acting them out because they're not talking them out? You know, I sit here and ask you a question. Well, did you guys have any crucial conversations recently? Or what conflict have you really had recently? Well, I myself, until last night, I couldn't have pointed to one for probably a year. But that doesn't mean there's not something running around in my head that's causing me to think one way that's affecting my actions in another. So some of it is just being introspective, that's a big word, but just thinking a little bit more about what's going on in here. Like what am I not really dealing with in my life that if I did in some way, shape, or form would help me, help my advancement of my faith, my relationships. We talk about in Identity Matters, and we talk about this tree of brokenness a lot, and what's happening down here at the root level so many times because we don't have our core longings met in one another, right? We as we seek that to happen in our addictions or whatever issues we run to have those core longings met, only Christ can do that. So if you're a believer in Christ, if you're somebody who puts your faith in him, that means that you have a source to have all those core longings met. It isn't about having my own way. It's about having it his way. And then selling into a peace, a sort of peace that comes with that peace that passes all understanding. It's not that I'm striving all the time. I mean, for me, when I was younger, to make up for what my father sowed into me, which was a lot of performance-based stuff. I mean, he was a tough guy. Like, he totally expected of me things that no one could have ever expected. He was a World War II vet. He was somebody who was clearly struggled with his own identity, a lot of anger. His dad took off when he was 18 years old and went to West Virginia. He lived in the Harrisburg area and worked. It was during the Depression. He was supposedly sending money back home to the family. I found out later it was much deeper than that. He had left his mom for somebody else. She had been with somebody else, and the family was split. There was 4 kids, and he was the oldest. And then his dad died at 38 years old. So think of the abandonment, the issues. Like, I found letters of him trying to write to his dad and try to connect on so many levels. He carried that with him his whole life. He never got underneath the anger. Even though he got saved probably when he was 40 years old, he just didn't figure out. When they had me, they came to know the Lord, and everything changed. At least for an eternity it changed. But in their real world around them, I saw a lot of difference. And I didn't know any better because I was just a kid, but you could see that anger just never being dealt with. So we have issues in our lives that we have to deal with all the time. How are we going to address it? Are we going to have the crucial conversations? Are we going to act it out, or are we going to talk it out? Are we going to talk it out with ourselves, a friend, a comrade, somebody you trust, somebody that's safe for you? So it's not just about our conversations we have every day with one another, the things that are crucial in those conversations. It's the things that we don't talk about that are really critical to our advancement as individuals. Like super awesome goals. I'm sure the last place you all wanted to be was in Water Street. Okay? I get that. But you are loved on around here like I have never seen. Like, my wife's number one. She's like number one love bug. Okay? If you don't get to know her, you got to get to know her. Okay? So, here's somebody who leads this crew. She spends more time or invests more time and loves just interacting with the guests here. If she could do that all the time, that's all she'd do. But then a lot of other stuff wouldn't get done. So you didn't sign up for this, but you're here. Right? Now, God has a purpose in your being here. I heard you talking earlier about that. Like, first time, like this is a tough thing. Walking in this door for the first time had to be extremely difficult. And trust me, it was even for me coming from the outside, not really knowing what to expect. But since I've been here volunteering for a couple years now, my life has been completely flipped around, and I love it. Like, I have some of my coolest friends and best friends that I have are people that I met here right now that I can just sit and have a conversation with. Go up in chalk, I sit down, people come over, we talk, we just hang out. It's like, I look forward to coming in here on Thursdays. I used to come in every day for almost 3 or 4 months. I was between businesses that I got out of one business, sold one, was starting something new. I had the chance to get here. It made all the difference in the world for me. I didn't know that. I didn't know what was lacking in my life and interaction with like I could totally be living here. I mean, it's not that hard to imagine. Like if I made a few wrong turns, made a few bad decisions, people kind of did some things around me that really hurt me. I don't know. Whatever the reasons are, it really doesn't matter. Like you have a life that there is a super awesome goal. God has a plan for your life. It's that simple. This just happens to be a stop off. And I would venture a guess that most of you have experienced love and consideration and some of the things that you're learning as a result of being here, and even in this area of identity. That's the big question for all of us. Like, who am I? Right? Like, why in the world am I here to begin with? Well, that's a really good question. Not here physically, but on this planet, because everybody has a purpose in God's economy. It's not about just existing and getting to that next place in life. That, dash in our tombstone really matters. Our start date and our end date. There's stuff in the middle that really matters. It really, really matters. And God loves you, and you're his kid. You're his kid. You're just a kid. And I love that because I just picture that moment with Jesus. I can just see it with the little kids coming and running, jumping on his lap. That's who I want to be. Like, I don't want to pretend to have it all together, but I also don't want to avoid the hard things because I fear some other outcome. The tree, that fear that existed when we chose to eat from that tree was like, oh, I want to be more like you, God. I want to know what you know. Little did we know, we didn't really want to know. We wanted to know, we thought we knew good. Then when we ate of the fruit, we realized, oh, well, now there's like magnitudes of good, right? No, not really. But there is in this world because we look at people on certain, everybody wants to judge around that. So I would encourage you just to dig in a little deeper to this content. If you want to read more about it or talk with one another, just be more open. Like, be more open to what God has for you while you're here and in conversation with each other. Consider the things that aren't being said that really are impacting your lives, that really matter. The things that you're feeling that you're not dealing with, but you might be acting them out. I know for me, like these isms here, but mine was workaholism. Mine was like everything was about performance. So that meant the harder I worked, the more stuff I accumulated, which I did over my lifetime. At one point, until God helped me to realize that they were all in the wrong spot. They were in the spot that only was reserved for him, and then one by one, he kind of stripped them away. It was big cars and it was all kinds of junk in my life that got in the way with my relationship with him. Well, that could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be relationships, it could be religion. So examining all the big questions for that super awesome goal to happen in your life would be a great place to start. And so I hope that even today you just took a little something away that will help you to ask some of the hard questions that you weren't asking before. So thanks so much, guys. Let me just pray for you on the way out, and then you guys can go. Thank you, Lord, for just this opportunity to get together and talk about things that matter to you. Those things in life that we avoid so often, or in conversations with friends or relatives, the ones that we're not having well or not having at all when we do think about the consequences of that. Lord, I pray you'll enlighten us, show us your way, show us how to love the way you would love, not the way we would, because we're flawed in that, Lord. But we also know we're forgiven, and we know that there's a plan. And I pray for everyone in this room, Lord, that you open up their eyes, their heart, to be able to see things differently, if they see through your eyes, to see one another in a different way, and to just get underneath some of the stuff that drives us to any place other than you. So we thank you. We pray a blessing over this group today. All in your name. Amen.